So you're using the workbook, you're offering the class, or you're taking the class. In either case, I think that these videos could be very helpful. And one thing to appreciate, I think, is that a lot of students in GE classes have just come straight from high school. But even many of those who don't come straight from high school, who have a year of college or have taken a gap year or something, have not ever really learned what the discipline of history is. And that's what these first pages are. Pages 1 through 3 are kind of an introductory statement to learn a stronger definition of history, the way that historians understand it. Historians work with primary sources and secondary sources and interpret the past. An interpretation is an argument. An argument is an opinion that's based on evidence, and the evidence in the argument for historians comes from primary sources. That's what history is. It's I understand that a lot of instructors at almost all levels will ask students to just memorize all kinds of place names and dates and the presidents and the counties and things like that. Then that information can be helpful, and that information can inform opinions. But the real work that historians do is interpret the past, and this requires from GE students, it requires maybe learning or adopting a new vocabulary or listening to some old words in a new way. And that's what these pages do. Just as a couple of pages introductory, here's what history is, and I think it needs to be impressed pretty strongly that history may not be what people think it is. I can't tell you how many comments I've had from students that, gee, I've never had a history class like this before. Boy, I didn't know that's what history was. I've never liked history before. All of those kinds of comments that suggest that that this is new to them, what they're seeing now. History is really interesting. I mean, history is an argument about the past. The other thing I would like to impress on them just right at the beginning is that they are capable of making arguments. In fact, in their own lives, they make arguments all the time. And they have arguments with their fellows, not arguments in the sense of fights, but arguments in the sense of interpretations, opinions using evidence, and contrary interpretations and so on. They're forming opinions based on reason, based on evidence, based on sound observation, and so on. And this is what they need to do in history. And so the study of history becomes a study of critical thinking, and the study of critical thinking becomes really this study and analysis of a student's own society. Are laws fair? Are we coming to terms with the mistakes we made in the past? Whatever it is. How to look at initiatives, voting initiatives, how to look at Supreme Court decisions, how to look at personal decisions, at laws, at public practices, even at how to look at relationships and families. To use reason doing this, and so the practice of using reason and reasoning, I think, is important. So a lot of students need to kind of set aside the idea of facts. Historians do discuss facts, and we'll say but more or less in the same way as a court of law would discuss facts. Here are the facts of the case. The fact simply means, there's an established agreement. An agreement is so overwhelming that that we're going to accept this as established and move on and adopt it as part of our reconstruction of what happened. But there are very few facts. I mean, if you ask a historian of the Second World War, did the Second World War begin in 1940 and end in 1945, they're likely to say no. If you ask historians of the French Revolution, did the French Revolution happen in France at this time and only at this time, the answer will be no. It started 100 years earlier, and it spread across the whole continent and then into the world, or whatever. I mean, even the facts are interpretations. Facts are always interpretations. This is one thing I love about history and love about historians, that historians understand that everything is an interpretation. Everything we say, every word we use, every painting, every song, every opinion is an interpretation. That doesn't mean that it's just my opinion or it's just your opinion. It means that my opinion is valid. My opinion, I can make my opinion valid. One thing I would tell students over the years was I thought of my job in discussion in class not to show that students were wrong, but to help them show themselves to be right, that they would be confident in their positions, that students can demonstrate that they're correct and that their opinions are valid and correct by using evidence and by using reasoning and following good rules of language. So here on page 2, there's this description of propaganda in the First World War. And with this, I think the book is trying to make a distinction between the truth and a truth. So everybody should understand already that you don't believe everything you read. You don't believe everything you hear. Because a source comes from the original society or the original people doesn't mean that it's telling the truth. Doesn't mean that it's automatically accurate. But it does mean that it contains a truth. I don't mean there's a kernel of truth in every lie. I don't believe that for a second. I think that's pernicious. But that there is a truth to be found, even in propaganda that lied. Like, why is this propaganda? Why is this convincing? How was this disseminated? How was it constructed, and so on. So that's kind of the function of this story. But then along the way, students will learn something about the First World War and about the use of the word propaganda and newspapers, and also the use of the word truth, and so on. This project, Project 1, is on pages 5 and 7 in the book. I don't always assign this, but I always want to discuss it. I want students to look at it. I want them to think about it. And the point, I think, should be automatically clear. Students make judgments about their own world all the time. They understand the significance of all kinds of things. A new video game comes out, and they understand the significance of the video game in the succession of video games, and with the video games have a genealogy, and they have game systems and all of this stuff. If a new class is offered, they understand the significance of an ethnic studies program, or the significance of a women's program, or they recognize those things in the context of the society they live in. If a law comes out that permits marijuana use recreationally, for example, young people recognize the significance of that. That's what this project is intended to show. Students can take lyrics from songs that they like, or passages or scenes from movies, and they can discuss the way that women are presented in those songs, or the way women are discussed in those songs, or the way that marriage is discussed or God is discussed, and that's significant. They actually are accustomed to forming opinions based on primary sources, maybe not historical, but sometimes when GE students hear a professor say, can you form that into a historical argument, this sounds a little bit daunting, sounds a little overwhelming. But in fact, they can do that. They do that all the time. They do that about politics, they do that about culture, about art, about their friends. They're formulating opinions based on evidence, and they're arguing and supporting their opinions. Or sports. I mean, people make, if you watch sports shows, you see there's deep analysis about, how did it happen that the Nets lost the series or whatever. It's argument. It's argument and it's evidence. So this project, in some ways, this project is a little premature in the course of the text to have it at the first position, because many students are not really ready to do this, but they're ready to hear it. And so it's here at the beginning. It could also be at the end. Now you recognize what argument and evidence is, and now do this project. But I think it's valuable to discuss it and to have students offer um, items from their own life, their own society, their own culture, and discuss the significance of them. Something new, a new fashion, how is that significant? What does it represent? A new use of a new word, a new phrase, critical race theory. Just the phrase itself is loaded with political implications, racial implications, social implications, and that would be a possible primary source. So the primary source could really be anything on these projects if you do decide to assign it. I don't have really a word count that I would recommend with this one. I think with this one it should be a little bit freer than that, and students should be allowed to go ahead and write what they want as much as they want. That's about it, because this opening is quite brief. So good luck. I hope this first project goes well.